Welcome to the English Vault. Today, we enter the life of Stephen Hawking, a man whose body became fragile while his imagination kept moving toward the edge of the universe. His story is often reduced to one image: a brilliant scientist in a wheelchair, speaking through a computer voice, explaining black holes to the world. But that image, powerful as it is, can make the journey feel too simple. It can hide the young student who did not always seem disciplined, the diagnosis that arrived like a closed door, the family that carried invisible weight, the scientific questions that demanded years of patience, and the public fame that turned a private mind into a global symbol. Hawking did not become inspiring because life became easy. He became inspiring because he refused to let one form of limitation define every possible form of freedom. His world grew smaller in movement, but larger in thought. He could not run from his condition, so he turned toward a stranger frontier: time, gravity, creation, and the strange darkness where even light seems trapped. Chapter 1: A Quiet Beginning. Stephen William Hawking was born in Oxford, England in 1942 during a world war. His family valued books, arguments, curiosity, and independent thought. Their home was not polished in the way some people imagine academic homes should be. It was crowded with ideas, conversation, and the feeling that questions mattered more than appearances. As a boy, Stephen was curious about how things worked. He liked clocks, model trains, and the hidden logic inside machines. He was not always the top student in the room, and some teachers did not see him as extraordinary at first. That detail matters because genius often looks ordinary before it finds the right problem. He grew up in a country rebuilding after war, surrounded by the promise of science and the shadow of uncertainty. Rockets, atoms, mathematics, and technology were changing how people imagined the future. For Stephen, the universe was not only beautiful. It was a puzzle that seemed to invite a stubborn mind. His family later moved to St. Albans, where he attended school and built a reputation for cleverness, humor, and occasional laziness. He could be sharp, playful, and difficult to impress. He liked big questions, but he did not yet move through life like someone racing against time. The first lesson in his story is quiet. Before the world knows your name, you are still being shaped. A small habit, a strange interest, an argument at the dinner table, a machine taken apart, a question that will not disappear. These things can become the first signals of a future nobody else can see. This is why his childhood matters. It was not a story of instant certainty. It was a story of attention slowly gathering power. The future scientist was learning to live with questions before he had the tools to answer them, and that patience would become one of his quiet strengths. Chapter 2: Oxford and the Unfinished Student. Hawking entered University College, Oxford, to study physics. He was young, intelligent, and not especially eager to work in the traditional way. He later said that he did not spend many hours studying. For some students, that would have been a disaster. For him, it created a strange reputation: brilliant, relaxed, and hard to measure. Oxford in those years carried old traditions and social codes. Hawking did not always fit the image of the serious scholar. He enjoyed rowing culture, friendship, jokes, and debate. Yet beneath the casual surface, his mind was learning to move with speed through abstract problems. Physics appealed to him because it searched for the rules beneath everything else. It was not only about objects falling or planets moving. It was about the deep structure of reality. Why does the universe behave this way? What is time? What happens when matter is crushed beyond imagination? Still, Hawking was not yet the icon. He was a student finding his direction. He wanted something deeper than routine success, but he had not fully committed to the discipline that such a dream would require. Life had not yet forced urgency into his days. That is one of the strange patterns of his biography. The pressure that would later threaten to destroy him also gave him a sharper sense of time. Before that pressure arrived, he was still drifting, talented, but not fully awake to the cost of wasting a gift. Oxford gave him confidence, but not yet urgency. He had learned that talent could open doors, and he had also learned that talent without direction can drift. The next stage of his life would remove that luxury, because Cambridge would bring him face to face with both the universe and his own mortality. Chapter 3: Cambridge and the Diagnosis. After Oxford, Hawking moved to Cambridge for graduate research in cosmology. He wanted to study the universe at the largest scale, the origin and behavior of everything. But soon after this new beginning, something frightening entered his life. He began to stumble. His speech changed. His hands felt less reliable. Doctors eventually diagnosed him with motor neuron disease, also known as ALS. He was only 21. The news was devastating. He was told that his future might be very short. The body he had trusted without thinking was becoming uncertain, and the dreams ahead of him suddenly looked fragile. For a young person, a serious diagnosis does more than threaten health. It attacks identity. It asks cruel questions. Who are you if your strength changes? What happens to ambition when the calendar feels shortened? How do you plan a life when life itself appears to be negotiating against you? Hawking fell into despair for a time. This part of the story should not be softened too much. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage often begins after fear has already entered the room and taken a seat. Then something changed. He saw other patients in worse conditions. He also met Jane Wilde, whose presence brought love, seriousness, and a possible future back into focus. The diagnosis did not disappear, but the meaning of the remaining time began to change. If time was limited, then perhaps every question had to matter more. The diagnosis turned ordinary moments into decisions. A staircase, a conversation, a plan for next year, even the idea of marriage, all carried new weight. Yet in that weight, Hawking began to see that a shortened future did not have to mean a smaller one. Chapter 4: Choosing to Work. Hawking returned to his research with a different kind of intensity. He was not suddenly free from pain, uncertainty, or practical difficulty. But the old casualness could not survive unchanged. The universe had become both his subject and his refuge. At Cambridge, he studied under Dennis Sayama, a mentor who encouraged bold questions. Cosmology was changing quickly. Einstein's general relativity had transformed gravity from a force into the geometry of space and time. Scientists were asking whether the universe had a beginning and whether mathematics could reach back to that first moment. Hawking's disease made ordinary tasks harder, but thinking remained open. That contrast became central to his life. A body may restrict motion, it may slow speech, it may demand help, but the mind can still travel through equations, images, and possibilities that no room can contain. He married Jane in 1965. Their life together carried love and strain from the beginning. Marriage did not make the illness simple. It created a family inside uncertainty. Jane supported him through work, travel, daily care, and the emotional pressure of a condition that never truly left the house. Hawking was now building a future in defiance of prediction. He had not defeated the disease. He had not received a miracle cure. He had made a more difficult choice: to continue working while the outcome remained unknown. Work became a form of resistance, but not a lonely, heroic pose. It depended on mentors, colleagues, family, and care. The public often remembers the individual genius, but the real story includes the network of people and tools that allowed that genius to keep reaching outward. Chapter 5: Singularities. One of Hawking's early scientific achievements involved singularities. A singularity is a place where the known rules seem to break down, where density and gravity become extreme. With mathematician Roger Penrose, Hawking explored whether singularities were not only strange possibilities inside black holes, but also connected to the beginning of the universe itself. This was not easy science. It required imagination disciplined by mathematics. The work suggested that under general relativity, the universe may have begun from a singularity. In simple words, the past might not stretch backward forever in the way people once imagined. Time itself might have a boundary. For most people, a boundary is a wall. For Hawking, it became an invitation. If time had a beginning, what did that mean? Could physics describe creation without leaving the question only to myth or mystery? Could the universe be understood as a whole, not just observed piece by piece? Meanwhile, his body continued to weaken. Walking became harder. Speech became less clear. The gap between public achievement and private difficulty widened. People could read the published work and see intellectual progress, but they could not always see the cost behind each day. The power of this chapter is the double movement. Hawking was losing ordinary forms of control while studying the largest possible questions of origin and destiny. The smaller his physical options became, the more enormous his intellectual landscape appeared. To think about a beginning is to stand near the edge of language. Hawking's work did not make the universe easy, but it made the mystery sharper. He was learning to ask questions so large that even partial answers could change the direction of science. Chapter 6. Black holes are not completely black. Black holes were once imagined as final prisons in space. Their gravity is so strong that not even light can escape after crossing the event horizon. To the public, they sounded like cosmic monsters. To physicists, they were places where the rules of gravity and quantum theory collided. Hawking brought these worlds together in a shocking way. In the 1970s, he argued that black holes should emit radiation because of quantum effects near the event horizon. This idea became known as Hawking radiation. It suggested that black holes are not completely black, and that over immense time they could lose mass and eventually evaporate. The idea was beautiful because it connected the very large and the very small. Gravity, thermodynamics, and quantum mechanics were suddenly speaking to one another in a new language. It also created deep puzzles, especially about information. If a black hole evaporates, what happens to the information about what fell inside? Hawking did not solve every question he opened. Great science often works that way. It does not close the universe like a box. It creates better mysteries, clearer problems, and a path for future minds to walk. For a man living with a disease that seemed to take things away, the scientific irony was powerful. He became famous for showing that even the darkest objects in the universe are not simply silent. Even black holes have a kind of voice. That discovery changed how people imagined darkness. A black hole was no longer only an endpoint. It could have temperature, radiation, and a future. In Hawking's hands, the most absolute silence in the universe became a place where physics still whispered. Chapter 7. A Voice Through a Machine. In 1985, Hawking became seriously ill with pneumonia while traveling. A medical crisis led to a tracheotomy, and he lost his natural speaking voice. For someone whose work depended on communication, this could have felt like another impossible loss. Technology became part of his survival and his public identity. With a speech-generating device, he learned to communicate through a computer voice. The voice was artificial, but it became one of the most recognizable voices in the world. It carried humor, patience, sharpness, and scientific wonder. There is a profound human truth here. Tools do not erase vulnerability, but they can reopen doors. A wheelchair, a computer, a screen, a switch, and later improved systems became extensions of will. They allowed Hawking to lecture, write, debate, joke, and remain present in the conversation. The machine voice also changed how people saw him. It made him futuristic, almost symbolic. But behind the symbol was daily effort. Communication could be slow. Travel required planning. Care required coordination. Fame did not remove dependence. Still, he continued, that continuation was not sentimental. It was practical, stubborn, and often funny. Hawking understood that dignity is not the same as independence. Sometimes, dignity means accepting help without surrendering the center of your own mind. Losing his natural voice could have pushed him away from public life. Instead, the new voice became a bridge. It reminded people that communication is not only sound from the body. It is intention, patience, technology, and the will to remain in contact with the world. Chapter 8. A Brief History of Time. In 1988, Hawking published A Brief History of Time. The book attempted something almost impossible, to bring questions about the universe, black holes, time, and creation to general readers. It became a publishing phenomenon and turned Hawking into a global cultural figure. Many people bought the book because they wanted to understand the cosmos. Some finished it. Many did not. But even the difficulty became part of the legend. The book told the public that deep questions belonged not only to specialists behind closed doors. Ordinary people could at least stand at the doorway and look in. The success of the book changed Hawking's life. He appeared on television. He became a symbol of intelligence, endurance, and scientific curiosity. His face and computer voice entered popular culture. For a theoretical physicist, this level of fame was unusual, almost unbelievable. Fame brought opportunity, but also simplification. The world loves symbols because symbols are easier than full human beings. Hawking became the genius who overcame disability, the mind beyond the body. That phrase is powerful, but it can also flatten the truth. He was not only a mind. He was a person with relationships, frustrations, ambition, humor, and contradictions. The book's title was perfect because it promised something both humble and impossible. A brief history of time cannot truly be brief, and time itself resists easy explanation. But Hawking invited millions to begin, and sometimes beginning is the most important intellectual act. The success of the book also changed what people expected from science. It suggested that wonder could be shared without making every idea simple. Hawking trusted the public with difficulty, and that trust became part of his appeal. Chapter 9. Fame, Family, and the Cost. As Hawking's public reputation grew, his private life became more complicated. His marriage to Jane carried enormous pressure. Caregiving, work, children, travel, illness, and fame created a burden that no simple inspirational quote can explain. It is important to tell this part with honesty. Inspirational biographies should not turn people into perfect statues. Hawking could be witty and generous, but also demanding. Jane showed extraordinary strength, but strength does not mean endless capacity. Their marriage eventually ended, and the human cost of the journey remained real. This does not cancel the inspiration, it makes it more mature. Real courage happens inside imperfect lives. People can create extraordinary work while also struggling in relationships. Families can love each other and still suffer under pressures too heavy for one house to hold. Hawking continued to research, publish, travel, and speak. He debated scientific questions, revised some positions, and remained intellectually alive. He enjoyed humor and often played with his own public image. He appeared in television shows, made jokes, and refused to become only a solemn figure. The cost behind the symbol is part of the lesson. A remarkable life is not a life without damage. It is a life in which meaning is built anyway, with help, with mistakes, with resilience, and with the courage to keep asking better questions. The human cost is not a footnote. It is part of the truth that keeps the story honest. If we remove the strain, we turn courage into decoration. If we include it, we see resilience as something built inside pressure, not outside it. By the time the world celebrated him, Hawking had become more than a scientist in public memory. He had become a reminder that the human story is not measured only by comfort, speed, or physical ease. Sometimes it is measured by the size of the question a person refuses to abandon. Chapter 10: The Universe Inside the Question. Stephen Hawking died in 2018, leaving behind scientific work, public imagination, and a story that continues to move people. His legacy is not only a list of papers or equations, it is a way of seeing the relationship between limitation and possibility. He showed that a human being can lose many forms of movement and still move the minds of millions. He showed that science can be serious without losing wonder. He showed that humor can survive in difficult places, and that asking a question can be an act of resistance. His life also teaches humility. The universe is bigger than our confidence. It does not bend easily to simple answers. Hawking spent his life near the edge of what can be known, and that edge did not make him silent. It made him curious. When people say he refused limits, the truth is more precise. He lived with limits every day. He did not pretend they were unreal. He refused to let them become the only story. That difference matters. Denial is fragile. Imagination is stronger. So if his story leaves one image, let it be this: a man sitting almost still, while his thoughts travel through collapsing stars, the birth of time, and the dark places where light seems lost. The body is quiet. The question is alive. And somewhere inside that question, a universe opens. If this story gave you a new way to think about courage, stay with the English Vault. Listen again, notice the words, and carry one question into your own day. What part of your life still has space to move, even when another part feels limited?